escalation. We might be witnessing US airstrikes on Venezuela very soon. Here from CNN, we learned that the US Navy's most lethal combat platform, the carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, is being sent to the Caribbean. It's one of the largest aircraft carriers ever built, and it has more planes on board than the entire Venezuelan Air Force. And you're going to tell me that this move is meant to fight off some, narcos, yeah. At the same time, the US military budget is huge, might as well make use of all this equipment, right? Actually, there's more. The Department of War has officially ordered the entire USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group towards Venezuela. Officially, the mission is to bolster US capacity to detect, monitor, and disrupt illicit actors and activities. Right. You don't redeploy your top aircraft carrier worth $13 billion just like that. As you can see, this is a huge escalation. The US Navy is redeploying its naval assets from the Mediterranean, from the Red Sea. Something is bound to happen. We can sense that Trump wants to project military strength and undercut Russian, Iranian, and Chinese presence in the Caribbean. You have to understand that Carrier Strike Group 12 represents the US Navy's apex of integrated naval power. This is the US military version of Plata or Plomo, just with a $1 trillion budget. Remember what Trump said not too long ago in mid-October.
We're not going to go into a war, but if we do, we're going to win that war like nobody has ever won a war before. We will not be politically correct.
Like the Romans said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Here from The Guardian we can read, sending the Carrier Strike Group to the Caribbean is the clearest sign to date that the administration intends to dramatically expand the scope of its lethal military campaign, from hitting small boats alleged to be carrying drug bound for the US to targets on land. That's actually a good analysis, yes. As a reminder, as of the 24th of October, the US military had carried 10 strikes against narco vessels, 8 in the Caribbean and 2 in the Pacific, very far from Venezuela. And in total, these strikes caused the death of 43 people. But according to the latest news, we're now standing at 15 strikes and 61 people KIA. And from the footage we could see, most of these strikes were carried out by drones, like the MQ-9 Reaper, for example. And it seems to be enough. Deploying an aircraft carrier against narcos is such an overkill. It's like using a sledgehammer against a mosquito. If you really wanted to fight narcos using these drones, the easiest for the US would be to establish a military base in Trinidad. And from there, they control the entire eastern Venezuelan coast. Oh, here's another reminder. According to the DEA's 2025 report notes, less than 3% of US cocaine transits Venezuela. I repeat, less than 3%. It's actually so ridiculous to gather such a massive armada for 3% of cocaine shipments going to the US. So the fact of bringing an entire carrier strike group to the Caribbean is pure American gunboat diplomacy. We can name the Opium Wars as the best historical example, or the US intervention in Panama. No, not the one from 1989, the one from 1903. Yeah, the story goes way back. Long story short, the US wanted to purchase French rights over the canal, but Colombia refused to ratify the treaty because of insufficient compensation and because the US demanded renewable lease in perpetuity from Colombia on the land proposed for the canal. Of course, Colombia was going to say no. As a result, surprise, surprise, a rebellion broke out in Panama calling for independence. Then Colombia, that was just getting out of a civil war, wanted to send troops to suppress this rebellion. And suddenly US warships showed up. And yeah, that's how Panama was created. Here's a cartoon of US President Theodore Roosevelt intimidating Colombia to acquire the Panama Canal Zone. Looks pretty much what Trump is planning to do with Venezuela. I think it's important to mention these historical reminders, because Trump might very well be inspired by them. All I can say is that the Caribbean Sea is America's Mare Nostrum. This is where they really applied the Monroe Doctrine à la lettre. So let's talk about this Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. 100,000 tons, it's a big girl, nuclear powered, and that carries between 65 and 75 aircraft. More than the Venezuelan Air Force. There are no aircraft carriers bigger than this one in the world. Of course, the aircraft carrier doesn't travel on its own. It will be escorted by numerous warships as part of this Carrier Strike Group 12, namely 5 destroyers. It's absolutely huge for an operation officially framed as counter-narcotics. Yeah, so 5 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, the USS Winston S. Churchill, USS Bainbridge, USS Mahan, USS Mitcher, all armed with 96 vertical launch system cells each, and the USS Forrest Sherman with 90 VLS cells. So in total, for these 5 destroyers, we're looking at 474 Mark I VLS cells. This is an enormous amount of firepower. I'm not even sure there's enough targets in Venezuela for all this. Both the USS Winston S. Churchill and USS Bainbridge are said to be anti-piracy veterans for their actions around Somalia 15 years ago and their recent combat operations in Yemen. So the destroyer USS Mitcher was operating in the Arabian Sea and the USS Forrest Sherman in the Red Sea, and they're all being redeployed with the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Caribbean. And that's not all. Carrier Strike Group 12 will also be escorted by a submarine, most likely a Virginia-class armed with over 40 missiles. Of course, it's also equipped with an advanced sonar that could be very useful to hunt down narco submarines. Anyway, I think we can all hear the sigh of relief from Iran. There are no more US aircraft carriers around them. They're all gone. Who knows, that's maybe why Trump really pushed for peace in the Middle East, so that he could safely redeploy its forces to the Caribbean. But of course, this is just speculation. So overall, we're looking at 8 vessels for CSG-12, on top of the 8 already operating in the Caribbean. Actually, I think there could be one additional vessel because here we can see that the cruiser USS Gettysburg is also joining the flotilla. Yeah, wow. Yeah. We're witnessing the largest US naval buildup in the region since the 1983 invasion of Grenada. In total, personnel for the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group exceeds 7,500, of which about 5,000 on the carrier itself. As a reminder, there are already about 10,000 US military personnel deployed in the Caribbean as part of this operation, so that would bring a total of 17,500 American troops around Venezuela. And if we add the USS Gettysburg, we're close to 18,000. Now, does this mean an invasion is imminent? Well, not really, because only 2,000 of them are actually Marines, meant for amphibious operations. In my last video, we already established that it's really not enough to actually storm Caracas. So what could the US military do? In my last video, we also mentioned airstrikes, and I think this option is becoming more and more plausible. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I highly recommend you to watch the first video I've done on Venezuela. Link will be in the description below. Let's take a closer look at the air component of the USS Gerald R. Ford. There are 48 FA-18EF Super Hornets, excellent for precision ground strikes and anti-ship warfare. Additionally, the Gerald R. Ford carries 10 F-35C Lightning IIs. By the way, another 10 of these stealth 5th-gen fighters are already deployed in Puerto Rico, so that makes a total of 20 F-35s. Overall, you will use the stealth of the F-35s to penetrate contested airspace, strike deep inland, and suppress enemy air defense nodes. In this case, they will then be followed by the Super Hornets. The F-18s excel in high-volume strikes against softer targets, like cartel logistics, military bases, or Venezuelan patrol boats, for example. But of course, they will not be alone in the air, because the USS Gerald R. Ford also carries 5 EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare and suppression of enemy air defenses, 4 E-2D Hawkeys for early warning, 360-degree radar surveillance, battle management, and 8 to 10 MH-60RS Seahawks helicopters. The Seahawk helicopters and the Hawkeys excel at wide area surveillance and fast boat interdiction, while fighters enable rapid response strikes. Course of action number 1. Venezuelan aircraft target US warships. Venezuela's Russian-made Su-30s could be extremely lethal. If successful, Venezuela will certainly gain PR points. But then Trump will get his Gulf of Tonkin incident, and the perfect excuse to unleash his wrath on Venezuela. Course of action number 2. Venezuela doesn't provoke the bull, so in turn the US military launches preemptive strikes to annihilate Venezuela's Air Force and Navy. Let me know in the comment section below if you think of any other course of action. The main targets for the US Air Force could be Punto Fijo, as it hosts S-300 launchers. La Roquilla Island that we mentioned in the last video, a radar outpost, could also be targeted, and of course all air defense batteries around Caracas. Then the goal could be to destroy the entire Venezuelan Air Force, which means targeting the 2 bases of Area Libertador and Area General Rafael Reyes Davila, and of course the Maiquetía International Airport. Meanwhile, the US Navy could take care of the Venezuelan warships deployed in Puerto Cabello, La Guaira, and Carenero Naval Station. And for extra aura, the US military could also target the HQ of the Ministry of Defense or even the presidential palace. The big question is, what is the expected outcome of this campaign? Well, clearly it's not to reduce drug shipments to the US. Maybe you're gonna bring it down from 3% to 0, but it's not a big difference. Well, Maduro said it himself. The Americans are seeking a regime change through military threat. Yes, it's very possible. And he continued by saying, the purpose of US actions is to create legitimacy for an operation to change the regime in Venezuela, with the ultimate goal of taking control of all the country's resources. You know what? It might be true. I mean, Trump said it himself. So, option 1, Maduro is deposed. Question is, who would replace him? Other generals or the US-backed opposition? Option 2, what if Maduro stays in power despite these strikes? I mean, he saw what happened in Iran. Massive bombing campaign, but the regime still holds. All this to say that the redeployment of the USS Gerald carrier strike group dramatically increases the possibility of US strikes on Venezuela. That's all I have for you today. See you in the next one.